Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we've got a brand new UFC 5 update to talk about. And honestly, this one might seem small at first glance, but once you start looking at the changes, especially the gameplay tweaks and the new fighter edition, it's actually a really meaningful patch. So yeah, this is update 1.028. And if you've been grinding ranked, doing your online championships, or even just trying to master your ground game in career mode, there's a lot in here that'll affect how your fights feel from the first bell to the final buzzer. Let's get straight into it. The biggest headline for this update is the addition of a new fighter, Jasmine Jasudavicius. Now, if you follow the real UFC, you know she's been putting in work in the women's flyweight division. Bringing her into UFC 5 feels like a really good move from EA because it keeps the roster fresh and adds more representation for that division, which, let's be real, can always use more variety. She's a grinder, she's tough as nails, and she's got a strong grappling base. If her in-game stats reflect even half of her real-life stamina and pressure, she's probably going to be one of those fighters that people underestimate at first, but later realize she's a hidden gem, especially for players who know how to control tempo and grind opponents down. But okay, let's talk about the actual gameplay fixes, because that's where things get interesting. You know how annoying it's been when you shoot a double leg takedown near the cage, and somehow your fighter just kind of awkwardly phases through space or your opponent magically slides away? Yeah, that's been fixed. It's one of those bugs that might not sound like a big deal if you don't use grappling heavy fighters, but for people who main guys like Khabib, Islam, or even Colby Covington, this is a game changer. Before this update, certain stance matchups like Orthodox versus Southpaw could make those cage takedowns misfire, which really broke the flow of fights. Now it's working properly, which means more consistent takedown animations, smoother cage entries, and fewer of those weird missed connections where your fighter just grabs air. This might sound like a small fix, but in UFC 5, where timing and momentum are everything, those kinds of improvements can shift the whole balance of a fight. You might have had moments where you perfectly timed a double leg, had your opponent's back near the cage, and still ended up eating a counter uppercut because the animation didn't trigger. That's gone now. It's cleaner, it's more responsive, and it honestly feels a lot more realistic. The ground game already feels so much better in UFC 5 compared to the older titles, and this patch just makes it even smoother. Now, there's also been a fix for upkicks and leg kicks from the ground. If you play a lot of ground-heavy matches, you probably noticed that some players figured out a way to throw a leg kick from the ground and then instantly spam upkicks, basically creating this awkward loop that felt more like an exploit than a realistic sequence. EA clearly noticed it too because they patched that out. So now, if you're on the ground and you throw that leg kick, you can't immediately throw an upkick right after it. The timing's been adjusted so that players can't abuse it anymore. And while we're on that subject, they also fixed an exploit involving the left shoulder button and the kick inputs. Some players discovered that by holding that left shoulder and repeatedly pressing a kick button, they could spam up kicks endlessly without actually throwing the leg kick first. It made for some chaotic and honestly kind of broken exchanges, especially in ranked matches where people would use it to escape pressure from top position. So that's been patched too, and thank God, because it made ground and pound sequences feel unpredictable for the wrong reasons. The change makes the whole striking from guard mechanic more balanced. It's now a true skill exchange instead of a button mash fest. The funny thing about these gameplay patches is that on paper, they sound technical and small, but in practice, they really alter how fights feel moment to moment. It's like when they fix something in the timing windows or adjust stamina drain, it completely changes how you approach a fight. That's why I think this update, even though it doesn't come with a massive list of new features, might actually be one of the more important ones for the competitive community, especially if you're someone who relies heavily on takedowns and top control. You'll notice right away that the consistency feels better, and it's not as frustrating trying to chain your wrestling together. Now, beyond the fixes, there's a little bit of extra flavor in this patch too. EA added new Vanity rewards and teased that more alter egos are coming soon. That's actually a big deal because the alter ego system has become one of the more fun parts of UFC 5. It's not just about new skins, it's about reimagining fighters in ways that reflect certain points in their careers, like when they released prime versions of classic fighters or stylized versions that match specific fight camps or historic events. So, even though they didn't drop new alter egos in this particular patch, the fact that they're teasing more means we're not far off from another wave of content. And let's be honest, this game really benefits from that kind of ongoing support. UFC 5 is still relatively young, and EA's been more consistent with updates this year than in previous entries. The player base notices when the devs stay engaged. It's what keeps people coming back. Even these smaller patches, like this one, show that they're paying attention to how people are playing online and making sure the meta doesn't get stale or broken. Speaking of the meta, the impact of these fixes might ripple out more than you'd expect. With takedown reliability going up, we might see a shift in how people play the pressure game. Fighters with heavy grappling stats are going to feel more dependable again. You'll probably start seeing more cage wrestling, more ground control time, and fewer fights that turn into pure striking brawls. That's not to say the stand-up game is less important, but it means you can't just ignore takedowns anymore. You'll actually need to defend them properly instead of relying on broken animations to bail you out. It also changes how players think about stamina management. With cleaner takedowns and less wasted motion, grapplers can conserve energy a little better. If you've played long enough, you know how stamina drain can kill your momentum late in the second or third round. Missing takedowns before was a huge stamina hit, but now that more of those animations land the way they're supposed to, it makes ground-heavy strategies more viable again. So, expect to see more players experimenting with fighters who might have been underused before. Guys like Curtis Blades, Merab Dvalishvili, or even some of the classic wrestlers like GSP. Now let's talk about the online experience. A lot of players have been reporting smoother match flow after this patch, which suggests EA might have made some under-the-hood stability tweaks too. They didn't mention it in the notes directly, but it feels like connection consistency in ranked matches is better. I've seen fewer input delays and weird lag spikes during clinch or ground transitions. Whether that's a side effect of the patch or a background server adjustment, it definitely makes the experience feel tighter. It's also worth noting that with the ground game tweaks, people who rely on cheesy escape mechanics are having a harder time now. You can't just spam buttons or abuse the old glitches to break out of bad positions. If someone's on top and knows what they're doing, you're going to have to play smart, manage your stamina, and use proper timing to get up. It's actually more strategic now. You can tell EA is slowly shaping the game to reward skill and timing instead of exploits or repetitive tactics. Now, about Jasmine again, this edition is interesting because it's not just about adding another face. It's a sign that EA is listening to fans who've been asking for more active fighters from the current roster. And they're not just focusing on main event stars, they're filling out divisions with up-and-coming talent, which helps the game feel alive and current. Jasmine's grappling and pressure style fits perfectly with the balance changes in this update too. She's not just a filler addition, she actually complements the gameplay direction they're moving toward. If you're planning to try her out, I'd recommend taking her into practice mode first to get a feel for her transitions and striking rhythm. She's probably going to shine in close-range exchanges and scrambles. You won't be knocking people out with a single punch, but if you know how to control distance and pressure effectively, she could be a real sleeper pick. Overall, this update feels like a quality-of-life patch that's setting up for bigger things. You can almost tell that EA is gearing up for another content drop soon, especially with the mention of more alter egos. That's usually how they structure it. Fix the core gameplay first, then bring in the flashy stuff. It's a smart approach because it keeps the foundation strong while giving players new reasons to stay invested. If you've been away from UFC 5 for a bit, this is actually a great time to jump back in. With these fixes in place, matches feel smoother, fairer, and more grounded.